In this video essay, we're going to be looking at comic book films from a kind of historical angle. While they've been very dominant recently, over the last couple of decades, while some of them were big blockbusters and had a major impact, many superhero films or so-called comic book films really had no major impact. They just sort of came and went. But they have a lot of great qualities that I think are worth looking back on. And in this one, we're going to focus in on Spawn, which is a very complicated story unto itself. So what is Spawn? Well, Spawn is based on the comic book by Todd McFarlane. I'm going to be condensing radically the basic story. Essentially, Spawn was a CIA assassin. He makes a deal with the devil to return to Earth, but he returns as a Hell Spawn, which is basically a soldier of Hell. And in the comics, it's very explicitly that he has a kind of energy limit. He can use demonic energy, but once he uses it all up, he basically has to be serving the devil. The film does keep the basic structure. He's still an assassin. He makes a deal with the devil, but they change quite a lot. And we're basically going to be hearing Will Walker, who has an excellent essay on Spawn and its virtues. I agree with most of what he's saying, that the performances are really amazing, especially Michael Jai White in the lead performance, which is an incredibly physical role because the makeup and the costume are very, very heavy. So I agree for the most part this is a very underrated film. I do disagree with him, however, and where the performances went wrong. He thinks that the Martin Sheen character was too cartoonish, whereas the Violator character made a lot of sense. I think it was the other way around, but I'm very prejudiced because I know the books very well. And the Violator is still a very hilarious and silly character in the comics, but he has a lot more depth, whereas I think we got a very simplified version with the John Leguizamo version. It's an interesting performance, but I think actually Sheen, Jai, and the others were a little bit stronger because, again, the way they did the Violator. So we're going to let him speak and then reassess what he has to say.
Makes the Ebola virus look like a skin rash.
Anyways, Wynn and Terry end up going to an international summit to meet with potential business partners. By the way, that woman in the blue dress and Spawn earrings is Angela, an angel warrior from the Spawn comics who slays Hellspawn. Her appearance here is little more than a cameo, but I assume she was to appear in sequels as a major character had the film done better. Much like Aquaman has a small cameo in Batman v Superman, but will eventually be a major character in Justice League. Spawn crashes the party in pretty spectacular fashion, crashing through the ceiling window and gliding to the ground using his cape. And once again, the CGI is really impressive. The movement and detail of Spawn's cape and chains is astounding for the time. It's almost like they're living organisms. Spawn confronts Wynn and delivers two of the many badass one-liners in the movie. In fact, there are so many that I'm just gonna do a badass one-liners counter.
What's the matter, Jason? You don't recognize your own handiwork. You sent me to hell, Jason. I'm here to return the favor.
Of course, Wynn isn't the only source of Spawn's rage at the party, as he runs into his former best friend turned daily ass pounder of life.
I trusted you.
Jesus.
How could you marry Wanda? How could you?
Al, when you died, Wanda was devastated. You know about Cyan?
The conflict between Al's love for Wanda, his anger at Terry, and his hate of himself is really apparent on Jai White's face here. Not only does this little exchange make Spawn a much more sympathetic character, it also makes his emotional crisis and inner turmoil a lot more relatable. Though, that being said, I do wish we got a little bit more scenes with Wanda. I'd like to hear her feelings a lot more. Spawn is about to kill Wynn when he's suddenly stopped by... Did you love the Oscar-winning Suicide Squad? Then there's a 98% chance you're gonna love this film. Honestly, you can really consider the Oscar-winning Suicide Squad to be a spiritual successor of sorts to Spawn, and Spawn the grandfather of the Oscar-winning Suicide Squad. Whether you loved or hated the Oscar-winning Suicide Squad, I truly believe you have Spawn to thank for its existence. Both mix a campy tone with a serious one, both deal with characters forced to let go of their desires for the good of others, both deal with characters learning how to love, both center on anti-heroes seeking redemption, both have similar cinematography, CGI, and visual style, and both have a very distinct, energetic soundtrack. The Oscar-winning Suicide Squad is a very divisive film, so recommending Spawn to fans of that film may not sound like a ringing endorsement, but I sincerely love and adore both. Spawn is not perfect, and admittedly could have been even better. Lore knows that a longer runtime, a better Jason Wynn, and less cringy dialogue would have vastly improved its quality. That said, it's well acted, exciting, funny when it wants to be, and emotional when it tries to be. It was a home run in an era when nearly every comic book movie was a strikeout, and is the farthest thing from bad. I'm gonna give Spawn an A-. So that's it for Spawn. An underrated superhero film with a lot more brains and heart than people give it credit.
Again, not many major disagreements here. I agree that the special effects for their time, for the most part, hold up. Some of them, especially towards the end, don't, because I think they were being a little overly ambitious. And the story as it is very nice. It's very well done. It's a very tragic, kind of heroic story of how Spawn did do all these things to himself. He had a choice. He could have given up being an assassin, but he was very proud of his work. He's very arrogant. And it's kind of a very slow realization in terms of what he has to do to gain redemption. The only thing I've found really where I would diverge from Will is he really did like the way they changed the adapted characters, whereas Caligostro as his mentor is much more distant in the books, and I prefer that version. Whereas they're borrowing a lot from Star Wars. I mean, the story is very derivative and using kind of this Obi-Wan Luke Skywalker relationship. I also found the kid insanely annoying, though not as annoying in New Nightmare. I understand he's supposed to be like a POV character. We're supposed to get engaged with Spawn because, again, I'll give the film this. It's extremely brave because I saw this in the theaters and it is shocking. Right off the bat, he kills a bunch of civilians and you're like, this is the hero? So I do give them a lot of credit for sticking to the main structure of Spawn. But in too many places, I just think they diverged. And the books are stronger because the Jason Wynn story takes a long time to develop, but you get a lot of interesting details. Here, it's much more simplified. It's a very simple kind of revenge thriller until the very end where he decides to choose mercy and basically refuses to become this kind of soldier of hell. One of the only things I would say that Will does not address, which is still dangling in my mind, is well, why exactly is Al Simmons so special? In the books, it's made a little bit more clear that he's kind of like a prophetized chosen one between heaven and hell. But in the film itself, it's not really clarified why he, in particular, is so important. Like, why do they need him to lead the forces of hell? Like, what makes him so special? Is it just he just is the protagonist? That was never really well explained. So part of the plot is kind of leaky, and I do think the director was way too focused on special effects. I mean, it shows he knows what he's doing, but I think that was a little bit too indulgent in terms of special effects over the story. But overall, a very strong film, and one that's kind of been forgotten, which is ironic because now minorities being superheroes is a very hot topic, but Spawn keeps getting forgotten for no good reason. So it's very interesting. I will say that as critical as I am, there were a lot of great little moments I loved about the film, especially the cameo by Angela. And I wish the film was more successful because I really was interested in what they were going to do with her. But it is what it is. And I want to be careful. There were some controversial aspects in terms of whitewashing. I'm focused here on the aesthetics. I'll do a separate essay on that. But yeah, it's a very interesting piece and a very powerful analysis by Will Walker. I'm going to link the description to see that essay as well. I'll try to do something fuller on Spawn and some of the other superheroes of the 1990s. It's really interesting how now, even though people are taking a lot from those films of that era, they're sort of been forgotten by the general audience, and people think that superheroes films really only began in kind of like 2005 and afterwards. But no, they've been around for a while, and the 1990s was a very interesting decade of exploring and experimenting with genre. All right, this has been Pop Cult Analyzed on the origins of the superhero mania in the 1990s with the case study of Spawn. Thanks for listening.